Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Erik, teacher with LSAT Demon. Joining me is Cole, one of the team members at the Demon, who has some exciting news to share. Cole, you know where you're going to law school.
I do. I'm excited. Definitely looking forward to the next chapter. Have enjoyed the LSAT journey and everything, the application cycle, but definitely looking forward to starting this fall. So,
Cool. So we'll just leave that as a tease for now. Stick to the end of the episode to hear where you're going. Let's start with your LSAT journey. Do you remember a diagnostic early on?
I do. Way back in December of 2022, I took my very first diagnostic. And this was a true blind, never even heard of the LSAT diagnostic. And it was a 152. So that was where my starting spot was.
Great place to start. Do you remember, was it like, okay, LRRC games you just didn't understand at all? It's a pretty typical place to begin.
Yeah, I was honestly about halfway through the test. I was like, this doesn't even seem like what you would do to get into law school. I was like, you play games to get into law school? Like, this is weird. But no, I remember LR being the most natural for me because it just made sense, right? But the games and stuff, I was like, this is kind of out there. But over time, obviously progressed.
Yeah. So what was your next step after that?
So I'll kind of give you a little bit of the timeline. So in December, I decided, okay, this is what I want to do in terms of studying for the LSAT, applying to law school, all that good stuff. I will add that I'm first generation applicant, so I was really naive at the time. So I was like, okay, well, there's a February test date. I'm going to start studying in December, and I'm going to take an official LSAT in February. So I did. And I think in that month and a half or whatever it was, I scored a 161 on my first, and this was an official attempt. So that happened. I was like, okay, yeah, perfect, great score. And I clicked send on some applications I threw together. I got all my transcripts sent to LSAC really quick. I threw together a resume. I requested and received letters of recommendation in a month and a half. I mean, looking back on it, it's kind of funny to think about it now. But
Mm-hmm.
I did actually try to squeeze into that 2023 application cycle for the 2023 start. Outcomes weren't great, got in a few places. And then obviously, once I realized how much I was progressing with the LSAT, I decided to stick with it because with the Demon, I was progressing quite quickly and in pretty big strides as well. So I decided to wait it out and continue to test, and I did. And it did take me several attempts, but I did end up scoring a 176. So that was really great.
Awesome. And your next round of applications, not as stressed and condensed a timeline as when you were trying to squeeze in late in the cycle previously, huh?
Yeah, it's funny because I did go back and look. I kept copies of everything from the previous cycle, and I'm a completely different app. Like the resume, the whole thing looks entirely, which it should have. But it was nice to sit over the summer and do some other writing and all of that stuff that takes a little bit of your time as well while I was prepping. I should add I was working full time as a teacher while prepping, so that was something else that was kind of pulling on my time as well. But
Hmm.
yeah, man, it was a totally different outcome when I decided to do it the right way and apply early with a much better LSAT.
All right. Well, let's get to the question on everyone's mind. You mentioned a better outcome. What are you looking at?
So I am going to be starting at the University of Texas in Austin this next fall.
Awesome. And Texas native, so that's your hometown school, best school in the state. Any scholarship we're talking about?
Yeah, so I did the calculation just a little bit earlier. I wasn't sure exactly what the percentage was, but it's right around like a 75% scholarship. So I did have a couple of full rides, but it was pretty important to me to um, be able to be placed in state in Texas after law school. And this is kind of a no-brainer, Texas being the best school for miles and miles around. So turned down a couple of full rides, which was hard to do, honestly, because no debt is really enticing. But
Sure.
with what my goals are in terms of where I want to work and what I want to do, Texas was by and large the best choice.
Nice. I'm sure you've done all your research and with your numbers, 75% scholarship to UT, that sounds pretty darn good. Doesn't sound like you're going to be paying for other people to go to law school, which is really what you want to avoid. Have you had a chance to visit the school yet?
Yeah, so we had our admitted student days in early April. That was actually my first chance to get into the building and finally meet some other classmates, meet some of the faculty there. And I was already leaning very, very strongly towards Texas for the reasons I just mentioned, but I wanted to kind of get that, intuitive feeling when you go into the building, you meet the people. And that trip definitely told me that I made the right decision. I was like, oh, I'm so thankful that, this is working out the way that I wanted it to. Because from the start, that's where I wanted to go, way back when I was scoring in the high 150s and the 160s and all of that. So it was nice to see the process come full circle finally.
Well, that's so cool. And you wouldn't have ended up there without having made the decision in the previous cycle to withdraw your apps, take some more time, take the LSAT again. Was that difficult? Was that something that was tough to do? I mean, were you feeling rushed and like, well, I've got my applications in. I don't know if I'll do better next cycle. Why don't I just take what I've got? Or was it like, so was that a challenge to you, or was it pretty easy for you to cut your losses and say, let's do this again next year?
It was pretty easy because by the time I was making that decision, my test scores were just skyrocketing basically. And all of the application deadlines for schools had passed, right? So it's like not like I can go rush a test that late and then also apply. So it wasn't a super difficult decision. And I mentioned earlier the outcomes weren't terrific. There weren't any schools that I was like super excited about going to,
Yeah.
especially with minimal scholarships. So I'm very thankful to have honestly stumbled upon the demon one day when looking through podcasts. And the mantra "don't pay for law school" has rang true to me in my ears like the whole application cycle. Like, and it's one of the big reasons I, strive so much for such a great score so that I could put myself in the best position to do that. So super thankful for that.
Well, let's go back to those improvements that you made on the LSAT. Seems like games was probably where you had the most ground to make up from when you first started. I'm assuming you got to pretty much perfect on the games. Talk about what that process was like. How is it that you got there to that -0 on LG?
Yeah, I mean, games was, and I'm so sad that it's leaving, honestly. Like it
I
makes me
know.
so sad for every future applicant that they won't get to experience games. But games got to a point where, I was pretty much -0 every time. And honestly, when I was taking PTs, when you're doing LR and RC, like it's very, it uses a lot of your brain power, I guess. And when I do games, it's just like kind of a break essentially from the more strenuous parts of the test. So I became really good friends with games. Honestly, on my official test, I remember games was like right in the middle. I was like, this is like a perfect break, man. I'm just like hanging
Nice.
out and doing my games. I do remember on my final attempt that I finished all four games and I was like, man, I still got some time left. So I actually like redid the two middle games. I just like redid them to make sure my answers were good. So I was like,
Sure.
man, this is like great. Because all my other test experiences, I had like come down to the wire, like answering the last question with a second left, So it was nice to actually feel good on test day for sure. And then RC was, and I think RC is always the tough one for everyone to get better at just because honestly, it's the way I change the approach to RC more so than anything. Everyone thinks in the beginning that RC you need to read through the passage as fast as you possibly can and get to those questions because you've got to answer the questions in the time limit, right?
Hmm.
And really just buying into the idea of I'm not moving on until I understand what I'm reading. And, if that means I don't answer all the questions, and so be it. And, as I slowly did that and got better at it, I got faster at it because I understood things a little bit better.
Mhm.
So just really changing the way I read was critical to my RC improvement as well. And like I said, LR was probably my best section to begin with. I had to obviously fine tune that to get down to that like -0 to -3 area to be able to score where I wanted to be. But that's kind of how the three sections broke down for me.
Nice. You mentioned having to change the way that you read, besides just slowing you down and giving yourself permission to take the time to figure it out, anything else that changed in how you read? Or is it really just as simple as slow down, understand it?
It is that simple, but it's also not. So
Hmm.
another thing that I think and this applies to LR and RC, is something that I really did like about the Demon was that it really emphasized taking power away from the test and giving yourself the power, if that makes sense. So as I'm reading something, like not being intimidated by unfamiliar language, or whatever the case may be, just take a second, read the words one at a time, understand what they mean, and eventually the meaning of the sentence will make sense to you, and that sentence will then make sense in the paragraph it's in, which seems really simple, right? But it's a hard thing to do when you're under a time limit with a bunch of questions. So
Hmm.
just really truly slowing down to understand, but also having the mindset of, this is, something that I'm in charge of, and I can dictate my journey on this passage. The passage doesn't have to dictate my journey, if that makes sense.
Totally. How did you get better at ignoring the clock?
That was a tough one, because I did do like a month and a half of study that was not with the Demon before I started with the Demon, and I discovered them via podcast, and then obviously free account and everything. But um, at first, it was emphasized with a previous prep company that I needed to be XYZ. I need to be done with this passage by this amount of time, or I needed to go fill in all my empty answers with this much time. There was a couple of gimmicks in there, I guess I would call them. But with the Demon, the great thing is you just literally click the clock and it disappears. So as I did every PT, I just clicked the clock first thing, and it wasn't there anymore, and I didn't really have to think about it. And the same thing was true on my official tests. I just honestly never even noticed it. I don't know if I was able to click it off or not, but I
Yep.
don't remember like looking at it the entire time or anything.
Yep. You can click on the clock and it will disappear. There will be a little bit of a progress bar that remains, but at least you don't have the 5, 4, 3. You don't have that kind of countdown, which is nice. Awesome.
Yeah, by the time I was like hitting my stride and in my groove, I just like honestly, I started reading. I didn't even like look at the clock, which was great because that habit was built by ignoring it with the Demon. So that was really nice.
At a certain point, you became an LSAT Demon team member. You want to talk about what you do for the Demon?
Yeah, so for the most part, I've been involved with answering ask button questions through the Demon. So basically, anytime students have questions with a specific, it could be a concept with the coursework. Most of the time, it's with a specific LSAT question. They send in a help ticket, and I'm one of the people behind the scenes that answers those. So um, unfortunately, I did that after receiving my high score. Honestly, I wish I had done it during my study, because I feel like it's so helpful to like lay your thoughts out on a page like that. But I
Yeah.
really do enjoy that work.
Yeah, I remember from the little bit of ask button work that I have done, it really tests your knowledge of the question to be able to teach it to somebody, to be able to answer someone's specific question about a challenging question. Start to write up a response because you think you know the answer. And then halfway through writing your response, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
And you're like, oh, I see where their confusion comes from, because this actually is like a really tough question. So I better parse this thing out a little bit better, or
Yeah.
whatever. So um, and I'm a big believer, and I think teaching is like one of the, if not the like best way to learn things sometimes, is, because you're forced to basically, like I said, lay your thoughts out. You're trying to present your thoughts to someone else. So doing the ask button stuff, I mean, I'm sure it would have helped me tremendously in my study. So if anyone's
Yeah,
able to do that, I would recommend it for sure.
totally. And you mentioned that you are a teacher, right?
I am, yeah. I'm a science teacher. I've taught high school and junior high science for 6 years, so making a total switch from the teacher life to going to law school. But I'm super excited about that.
Yeah. Can I ask why the career change?
Yeah, so I've been teaching and coaching in Texas, and my straight out of school, my original goal was to be an athletic director one day. And at the conclusion of my football season, in my 5th year of coaching, I really came to the conclusion that that's not what I wanted to do anymore. So I had to go back to the drawing board because, I wasn't sure exactly which direction I wanted to go. I thought about what I enjoy, what my strengths are, and arrived at I'm going to apply to law school basically. I really enjoy reading, really enjoy writing, so I'm going to give it my best shot. And here we are, over a year later, getting ready to start this fall. So um,
Cool.
kind of an
Well,
interesting journey, but super excited.
yeah. Well, I was going to say that being a lawyer can be a high pressure job, but I imagine being a football coach in Texas also comes with a certain amount of pressure. So shouldn't be anything new for you.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And then the hours is another thing. It's like
Hmm.
I've worked several 7-day weeks for months on end. So hopefully that workload will translate nicely in law school for me. Although it will be very different workload.
You going to keep working with the demon at all? Or are you just going to hunker down and commit to 1L?
I think I'm gonna commit to 1L at first for sure because it's kind of scary in a way, the way everyone like makes the 1L sound so like terrifying. So I'm gonna dive in headfirst to that, and then if I feel like I can manage some tutoring on the side, I will do that as well. But
Nice.
definitely full into school first.
Excellent. Well, can't wait to hear about how all that goes. Look forward to hopefully bringing you back on the podcast in maybe a year or so. Check in on how 1L went for you. Anything that you want to leave our listeners with? Words of advice or encouragement for those who are on the LSAT grind right now?
Words of I would say this. I would say your LSAT journey is what you make it. So if you want a fast result and to send off applications, you can totally do that. And you can get into schools and sometimes with money to schools. But if you want the best possible outcome for the best possible price, it's going to be a time investment. But if you make that journey into that, then it will reap those, you can reap those rewards from it. But basically you get out of it what you put into it. So that's something that I kind of carried in the back of my mind throughout I don't know, what was it, 9 months of study? Because I finished in September with the September LSAT. Is that, the journey is what you make it. And if, you're willing to extend it a little bit longer, you could, reap 5-6 points out of it. So it was worth it for me in the end.
Well, Cole, thanks so much for coming on. Great to chat. And thank you for sharing your story. Look forward to having you on again. I know you're going to crush it at UT.
All right, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on again.
All right. Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.